A guy on the field as there is in baseball. 3-2 coming, and Lindor socks one to center field. Sanchez back to the warning track at the wall. He's got it here. Hammer, blast off, left field, number 1. Here it comes. Julio Rodriguez with a max of a 3-run bomb, and the 21-year-old makes your first one.
So, should we bring in the closer? And
I think it'd be a good time for that.
All right.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number, oh my God, it's like 48. 48 of Free Baseball. It's just us this time. No extra dudes. Just me and Jake.
Just the cool guys.
Yeah, Jake had monkeypox last week, so he could not be on. But that's okay because he's back and he's healthy now, so we can talk about baseball because it's almost time. Pitchers and catchers are reporting for spring training. It's real. Baseball is happening. I don't know what to do with my hands. Baseball is happening. It's like play the Michael Scott gif in The Office. Oh my God, it's happening! But pitchers and catchers have been reporting. Seeing the clips of BP is just like music to my ears. Wonderful, wonderful times.
Yeah, it's best time of the year. We survived the off season. Couldn't have done it without the podcast. Definitely helped us get through it. And now it's time to bear down and really get ready for fantasy drafts and that kind of stuff. But for people that don't use the sport for other avenues like fantasy or podcasting or writing, it's time to start getting pumped.
Oh, yeah. This is going to be a year that I'm going to attempt to play fantasy baseball. It's going to be baby's first fantasy baseball. If Jake's still going to have me, I'm going to go win his home league. All of my wonderful fantasy sports knowledge. But before we talk about fantasy sports or anything else, I always, off-season transactions time. You know how it's been going. Last few episodes, all about the offseason transactions. Do it every single time. And then we'll start with Jake Crumpler's favorite baseball team, the Los Angeles Dodgers, have extended their all-star replacement for Trey Turner, Miguel Rojas. They've extended him. His 2023 salary has been changed. A little bit of a weird rework. It's been converted from $5 million just flat salary to $3.5 million and a $1.5 million signing bonus. He's going to be due $5 million in 2024, and he's got a club option for $5 million. 2025 with a $1 million buyout in there. So like a combination restructure plus an extension. So Miguel Rojas is going to be tied down for a couple more years with the Dodgers. We already talked a lot about Miguel Rojas, like when the trade actually happened. Mm-hmm. So I think we'll kind of leave his stats like more or less alone, but I don't know. This feels like a very anti-Dodgers sort of move. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm surprised they love him so much without even having him play a game for the team. He's definitely just a defensive guy, so I guess they feel pretty confident about him continuing to be elite up the middle for the next couple of seasons. And, they want that security there in case their guys coming up through the minors or Gavin Lux can't end up handling shortstop. They've got that like secondary option of turning to Rojas and just sticking with the glove first guy. So I guess they're pretty confident. They talked with him when he arrived in LA and they were like, okay, we like you. We want you to stay around.
Yeah, it felt weird because they just traded for him and it's not like Miguel Rojas really hits. Like, I mean, he's not a net negative hitter most of the time, but he's very much average. Glove work kind of makes up for it. This just felt a little bit weird for me. The Dodgers aren't ones that kind of, unless it's their core guys that they've had for a while, like, Turner and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But this was a very anti sort of Dodgers move. Another move, was the Cleveland Guardians trading Will Benson to the Reds in exchange for Justin Boyd and a player to be named later. Is there a whole lot to talk about here, Jake?
There's not a lot to talk about, but Benson's pretty interesting, and anybody getting a chance in Cincinnati is also sort of interesting. The Reds aren't good, but their ballpark is amazing for hitters, and they are bad. So they have opportunities to let young players like Benson play. He's pretty interesting. He's got power, he's got speed, and he's got plate discipline. Last year at AAA in 89 games, he hit 17 home runs and stole 16 bases with a nearly 19% walk rate. That's like Juan Soto level walk rate. So he's very patient. He cut down on the strikeouts last year as well. That was a 153 WRC plus at AAA. He didn't do too much in the majors, but playing in Great American Small Park, he could actually be really good if he gets the opportunity. So it's pretty interesting. He's going to be 25 this next year. I'm confused why the Guardians would trade him. They've always seemed to need a lot of outfielders, and they never seem to find good ones. Right now they got like Stephen Kwan and Miles Straw and Oscar Gonzalez. So I guess they feel pretty set right now, but Benson's sort of interesting. And I guess in return, they got a young guy, a 21-year-old outfielder. So I guess they're sort of prolonging. He has very little experience in the majors. He was just drafted last year in the competitive balance round, so it was like 73rd overall. So I guess he's got some potential, but he barely played in the minors, so I really don't know anything about him. So I guess they sort of feel, push this down the road by getting a different prospect, and hopefully he can come up and be trade bait at some point. I have no idea.
Yeah, Boyd isn't. I don't really know what the deal with Boyd is, because he doesn't really jump off the page either. He's 22 now, so I think next season will count as his 23 season. I know it says he's 21 on Fangraphs, but he's literally
is 22.
Okay, well, he's like literally like right on the cusp of being 22.
Mm-hmm.
He's only really played at A ball in the complex leagues, and he strikes out a ton. So I don't know what really the point of this, because Will Benson, I mean, if you look at his scout tools, the big thing was like his power. So they projected him to at least be sort of like a platoon guy. Maybe kind of like a Piscotty, or who are the guys with the Giants that they platooned all the times in the corners?
Lamont.
Well, Lamont, and then who's the other guy?
Yaz.
Yaz, and like Alex Dickerson.
Austin Slater.
Yeah, Austin Slater. Guys like those. So this is sort of a weird move, but I don't know. Maybe it won't be much of anything. Maybe the Reds will strike gold. We'll revisit that one later. Maybe, probably not. The San Diego Padres have extended one of my favorite baseball players of all time, Yu Darvish, for 6 years, $108 million reduce. He has a full no trade clause, which is kind of interesting, because Yu Darvish has been one that's been subject to a couple big trades in his career. Now, of course, being traded to the Padres from the Chicago Cubs, which he was still in the middle of that big money deal, but they've extended for 6 more years. Any Cy Young win within the first 5 seasons, which if you actually want to go back and look at my predictions, I think I like his chances for this upcoming season. It would boost his 2028 salary by $1 million, and it buys out full 5 years of free agency. Yu Darvish is in the middle of his 30s now, but it's weird to call him not a velo guy, because he still pumps like 95, but he's a really high repertoire guy. He throws so many pitches. He's very crafty. And he's become a control artist in the last few years of his career. Honestly, with the money that guys like Scherzer have gotten, and Verlander, which I don't think Yu Darvish is quite in that tier. I think he's like, if they're the S tier of like older pitchers, I think he's in the A+ tier, just one rung below. This honestly seems like a really good deal for a guy like this, who is going to be playing in a pitcher's park and getting some help from some pretty good players on his team. Maybe not so much defensively, we can see outside of like Machado, but Yu Darvish is going into his age 36 season. He's getting a 6-year extension. So he's going to be 42, 43 when he's done with the entire thing. So I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think I agree with all of your sentiments. The idea that he's figuring out how to pitch with diminished stuff, or the fact that we've seen a lot of star pitchers be able to succeed late in their careers, prolonging their careers by pitching differently or just not falling off. So I think you can sort of feel confident about Darvish. He was sort of injury prone earlier in his career, but he's been able to overcome that in the last 4 seasons. So I think he's pretty reliable. They're not paying him too much. It's like less than $20 million a year for the 6 years. So that's really solid. It is just crazy that you never see extensions until a player's 42 season. So it'll be interesting to see if he can hold up into his early 40s, which is crazy to say. But yeah, I'm excited to see him continue pitching in Major League Baseball for that long. You never know a guy of this age how early he's going to retire. But at least now we're like locked into seeing Yu Darvish for the next 6 years.
I'm always a fan of that, being locked in for 4 years. Yu Darvish, that in and of itself is very nice. I'm a really big fan of his. I just really like him. He's a cool guy. Really good fan stories, considering just how awful the Cubs fans treated him the first year he was there. But he ended up becoming sort of like a cult hero. So I really like Yu Darvish. And speaking of the Cubs, they added a veteran to their bullpen. I know we've talked several times, or at least I have, about their bullpen and a bunch of young guys being sort of like the building blocks for it. But they've added a veteran. They've signed Michael Fulmer, formerly of the Minnesota Twins and the Tigers, to a 1-year, $4 million deal. I think the numbers just came out this morning. But they add a vet to their bullpen.
Yeah, and there's probably a shot he can close out some games. I know Brandon Hughes is probably the number one in that bullpen, especially because he was closing games last year. But we've seen Fulmer close games earlier in his career. He's a former Rookie of the Year award winner, and he's actually a pretty good pitcher, especially over the last couple of years as he's transitioned to the bullpen full time. Looks like 2021 and 2022, he's combined for a 3.17 ERA across 133 innings. So that's pretty solid. It also comes with like a 23% strikeout rate, which is pretty good as well. This isn't a huge, crazy signing, obviously, less than $5 million. Normally the dollar total is commensurate with how impactful the player is, but I think Fulmer could be pretty underrated, especially, that Hughes is a lefty, and usually we don't see a lot of lefty closers. They like to save those guys for innings where there's lots of lefties, and Hughes is the only lefty projected to be in that bullpen. So I could definitely see Fulmer taking a lot of saves. He's already projected to be in a closer committee with Brad Boxberger and Adbert Alzolay as well. So that'll be pretty interesting to watch.
Yeah, Fulmer sort of fits the mold for bullpen arms and pitchers, honestly, in general for the Cubs. If you're unfamiliar with the Cubs, they tend to favor sort of the same sort of guys. They really like guys that really get ground balls and throw sliders. And Michael Fulmer is a huge slider guy. If you look at his Savant page or something, he threw like 400 and something more sliders and fastballs last year. So he threw them like 60% of the time. And he throws a gyro slider, which is not quite what they really like. They tend to like really heavy sweeping sliders. But whatever works. He has a career 2.98 ERA in relief, something like that. Yeah, he's pretty good in his slider velo, really good. Average slider, topping out about 90.8, 91 on average. So yeah, I mean, he's pretty good. I think there's one more spot that they could be prepared to fill in their bullpen, but we'll see if they actually do that. He's on a 1-year deal, so if the Cubs suck, he'll get traded to the deadline. So no harm, no foul. The Astros, we talked about it. Yu Darvish being on the early predictions part of the article. And if you go back and read that, you'll also see about this guy. And it's the Astros have extended Christian Javier 5 years, $64 million. It's going to buy out 2 years of his free agency for one of the game's budding young aces.
Yeah, it's a really good job by the Astros to lock him up for 2 extra years, especially because many are predicting a huge breakout this upcoming season. So it should be a good deal overall. I mean, I don't see any situation where Javier gets so bad that when we're looking at those first 2 years of free agency where he's probably making, I don't know, $15 to $20 million, that we're like, oh my gosh, they really screwed up with this deal. So I think it's really good that they'll keep him around, especially at a decreased pay level, which if he does actually break out, he could be would be missing out on a lot more money if he were to reach free agency when he was supposed to.
Yeah. God, I was trying to look up Christian Javier on Fangraphs and I clicked Christian Pache. That guy plays baseball.
Not really.
He tries his best. Yeah, Javier's really good. I mean, his stats last year were like just very good, albeit in a relatively short amount of innings from a starter. He didn't throw 150 innings. And he's kind of been flexed in more now stretch because he's basically been like a swing man or in the pen. And then last year he just kind of broke out. I think he had like a 2-something ERA and like a 3 FIP, something like that. Yeah, 2.25 ERA and a 3.16 FIP. Worth like 3.5 WAR. I think he's really good. I like Javier, and the Astros have proven now that they're really, really good at pitcher development with a lot of their young guys like Framber and him, and then guys in their bullpen. So this really solid work from the Astros to lock up Javier, because like even at this rate, buying out 2 years of his free agency at this kind of money honestly feels like Christian Javier didn't really bet high enough on himself. So, but oh well. I mean, $64 million also.
I'd be down.
Yeah, I think I would too. Another guy that has signed with Jake's favorite baseball team, the Los Angeles Dodgers, is David Peralta. He signed for 1 year, $6.5 million with $1.5 million worth of incentives. Peralta surprisingly made it this far in free agency. I would have thought he would have already been off the board, but saying is the rich get richer, and the Dodgers, one of the best teams in baseball, get one of the best bats left available in free agency.
Yeah, and it's he's pretty average, which sort of that's probably why he lasted so long. He's going to be 35. He's been like his career WRC plus is 111, but that's sort of pumped up by 2 outlier seasons. He's been around a 105 WRC plus for his career, and he's been a pretty solid defender as well. He should platoon out there in left field, probably with either Trace Thompson or Chris Taylor, or a little bit of both, or move around like they like to do over there. He's doesn't have a lot of upside, but he's good for like 10 home runs and a 250 average. So he should be pretty solid. I'm sure the Dodgers will get the most out of him, and he'll have a 150 WRC plus or something crazy.
Yeah, the Dodgers tend to do that with guys like this. Peralta, he's had a couple really good like outlier seasons, but I think it's important that they're also bringing him back to. He was with who at the back end of last season with the Brewers.
Rays.
The Rays, that's right. So they're bringing him back to the NL West, where he spent most of his career, obviously former Arizona Diamondback. And speaking of the Arizona Diamondbacks, they have signed Andrew Chafin, who this guy should never have been in free agency this long. He signed to a 1 year, $5.5 million deal. It's got a $7.25 million club option for 2024 and a $750,000 buyout, $1 million worth of incentives left there. Probably the best lefty reliever that was left, and one of the best in the market in general. And he's signing with a non-contender really late into the free agency sort of window. This one was a little bit surprising that he fell this hard, because Chafin is really good. I mean, he's had a couple good seasons back to back. So seeing him last this long was a little surprising.
Yeah, I was very surprised. I really thought he was going to go to a contender, especially after he backed up that 2021 where he had a 1.83 ERA by posting a 2.83 ERA in 2022. So that combines to like a 2.30 over across 126 innings across the past 2 seasons. He's also struck out like 26% of batters. So he's been really good. And there was a real lack of left-handed relieving talent on the free agent market. So I thought Chafin would easily land with a contender pretty early on, and he did not. Maybe he was asking for too much money. I don't know. But the Diamondbacks will bring him in and add to a bullpen that has actually gotten pretty stacked, not in the way that you're like, oh, this is going to send them to the playoffs or whatever, but they just have a lot of guys. You don't really know who's going to close here because they got Chafin, they got Kevin Ginkel, All-Star Joe Mantiply, Mark Melanson, Miguel Castro, and Scott McGough. It's just a lot of guys. I don't think Chafin closes out games. Maybe that's probably part of the deal or whatever. He wanted to be a closer, but they've got so many guys there. He's a lefty. You don't really see a lot of lefty relievers. He's competing with Joe Mantiply, who's another lefty and was an all-star last year. So he's got a lot of competition there. So I don't know if he's going to be getting saves out there, but he is really good. And I would be very surprised to see him on this team after once it comes to August.
Yeah, I mean, like it felt like the best lefty relievers at one point left were like him and Matt Moore, and like Chafin took forever, and Matt Moore is still out there. So it's like I don't know why teams are not really chasing guys like this and chasing guys like Aroldis Chapman. Aroldis Chapman went off the board a lot faster than Andrew Chafin. That makes no sense.
Royal's gonna royal.
Aroldis Chapman, one is a garbage person, and two is garbage at baseball. So Chafin being left, and then guys like that are just a lot tangibly worse, is a little surprising. Surprising move. This one made Jake mad when this happened. The Dodgers signed Alex Reyes, former St. Louis Cardinal, to 1 year, $1.1 million deal. This has a club option, though, 2024, $3 million. It's got $2 million worth of incentives for 2023 and $8 million worth of incentives, which seems like a lot in 24. But yeah, Reyes is a big reclamation project for the Dodgers bullpen, and I will let Jake lament about it himself.
Yeah, I saw this and I was like, oh my God, the Dodgers are going to make him so good. He's just got so much potential. He was like a top 5 prospect when he was coming up through the Cardinal system, but he's always dealt with a ton of injuries. I think he debuted in 2016, then immediately had Tommy John surgery, and then pitched 7 innings combined across the following 2 seasons, 2018 and 2019. And then 2020 was the shortened season, and he didn't even pitch more than 20 innings. And then 2021, he finally had his first full season, and he was really good in the first half, but he was sort of overperforming all of his peripherals, and it fell apart in the second half, and he lost the closer role to Giovanni Gallegos. And then he was injured all of last year again. So it's really hard to keep this guy healthy. If the Dodgers can find a way to do that, I think he's going to be really good. It's a guy that doesn't throw a lot of strikes, so that's another thing. When he is on the field, he's got to throw strikes. So just keep him on the field, get him to throw the ball in the zone, and he's going to be really good. And I feel like the Dodgers are one of the teams that are probably primed to get the most out of him. So I'm really disappointed, especially because if they do keep him healthy, the Dodgers have a weak bullpen, I would say. Like, they've got some guys that are pretty underrated, like Daniel Hudson and Evan Phillips were like old guys that were really good last year. I guess Evan Phillips isn't old, but they were both really good last year. Alex Vesia has been really underrated the past few years, and Brusdar Graterol has a ton of potential. So they sort of have a lot of guys there that are really good, and you never know what's going to happen. But yeah, I think Alex Reyes had shoulder surgery last May, so he might not be ready for the regular season, but when he is, I mean, there's a lot of potential in this bullpen, especially with what they've been able to do with a lot of guys. So I'm sort of scared that they're going to turn Alex Reyes into one of the best relievers in baseball again, and that would really suck for the NL West.
Yeah, speaking of bullpens, the Oakland Athletics trade AJ Puck to the Marlins for JJ Bleday, swapping top 6 picks. AJ Puck, obviously. He's going to have to be the closer in Miami. I don't imagine why they would trade for him if they're not going to do anything with him like that. But top 6 picks being swapped. Bleday just kind of hasn't really worked out for the Marlins. A's continue to tear it down, and Bleday is going to get a change of scenery, get to go out and play in Oakland. What are your thoughts on this move? Obviously, as you're the Bay Area guy, you follow the A's. Are you excited for JJ Bleday because he's been sort of meh? Like, he hasn't really accomplished much in the big leagues. Obviously, he's got to have some sort of potential. He's a former top 6 pick and a pretty highly touted prospect for the Marlins, and it just never really worked.
I mean, originally I was pretty disappointed because I've always liked Puck since he was drafted. He's always shown a lot of potential. I thought he was going to be a really good starter, and he was actually a really decent reliever last year. He's always dealt with injuries and stuff, and I think they were going to try him out in the rotation this year, which I don't know why they would do that, considering he finally had some success and has always struggled to stay healthy. But the more you think about it, the A's are not really going to compete for this year and probably the next 2 years either. So giving Bleday a chance to tap into his potential is probably really good, especially because the A's don't have a lot of like significant offensive bats that are going to make a real difference in games. And Bleday obviously has the potential for that, having been a former top 5 overall pick, number 4 in 2019. That was pretty recently, but he really, like you said, hasn't shown enough. And that's not just in the majors last year. That was also throughout the minors. He's shown the ability to hit for power. He hit 20 home runs at AAA last year, but he's always struck out too much. He walks a ton as well, but he just struggles to make contact. He strikes out too much, but then he also just does not hit for a high average, and that shows that he's just like, it seems like he's like home run or bust, like sort of just 3 true outcomes type guy. I don't know what he's like in the field, but I imagine he's not incredible since he didn't come up as like a center fielder. But he's going to be 25 next year. He's going to be in the majors right away. It should be pretty interesting that they'll give him enough playing time to hopefully tap into his potential. Like I said, I don't have a ton of confidence that that's going to happen because he hasn't shown that. But fingers crossed that just having the pressure off and a change of scenery gives him the opportunity to get back to what he was doing in college. But yeah, AJ Puck in Miami should be pretty interesting. They really have a very light bullpen right now. I think they were looking to have like Dylan Floro, Matt Barnes, and Tanner Scott fight for closing opportunities. And I think Puck is the best one of those three or of those four, and obviously has the highest potential. So that should be pretty cool to see Puck back out there. I guess his starting days are over because that rotation is stacked, so they have no use for him there. But yeah, I would love to see Puck take off for the Marlins.
Yeah, did you have AJ Puck and Jesus Luzardo teammates again on your bingo card?
On my bingo card, I did not.
Yeah, one thing about Puck is he was just so much better away from Oakland last season. Looking at his home and away splits, I mean, you got 29 innings at home to a 4.03 ERA, to 23.8% K%, 5.22 FIP, and then a 4.35 xFIP, and then away he threw 37 and a third, and then he had a 2.41 ERA, 2.5 FIP, and a 3.15 xFIP with almost a 30% K%. So getting him away from Oakland might be the key to unlocking him a little bit. We can see later, but Blade, maybe getting him the at bats he needs every day can fix issues with him. He's a really high strikeout guy. Apparently, there's a really bad hole in his swing for fastballs up, which is kind of how baseball is going. So maybe, just maybe, the A's can figure him out. But I don't know. This is a move for the A's. The Padres make another one though. Kings of making moves in the offseason. They signed Michael Wacha to a 4-year deal worth $24 million, a little bit more than $24 million. But yeah, I mean, they add Wacha to a team rotation / bullpen, wherever they're going to fit him in. I think it's a pretty good deal for someone like him. He's always had a lot of potential and seems to never really live up to it. So maybe the Padres can figure something out with them out of Petco.
Yeah, it's crazy that they just keep adding major league caliber talent to this team. I saw a meme on Twitter where somebody asked how many 40-man roster spots the Padres have.
80.
Yeah, 90, I think. I think there was also like a bug on their website and it said 90-man roster.
God.
That's so true. But anyway, Wacha is pretty lucky to net a 4-year deal. I was really surprised. I literally just entered that into the rundown right before we started, and I was like, wait, what? He got 4 years? I would have expected him to get maybe 2 at most. I was surprised the Padres were willing to do that considering the state of their team, but he really has. It's hard to pin down what kind of pitcher he is. I think he was lucky last year to pitch to a 3.3 ERA, and the 2 seasons prior to that, he had an ERA over 5, and 2019 he was near 5. So he hasn't had too many really good seasons, and I don't know, now he's entering his 30s and he's not like a guy that throws a lot of innings. He's never thrown more than 180, and that was back in 2015. So I don't feel too confident about this deal is from the Padres angle. Like I'm glad Wacha got his money, but I don't know why the Padres thought that Wacha was the guy to go get. I just don't see too much in his repertoire that excites me. But they do have a lot of options. Like you said, they were trying to transfer Nick Martinez and Seth Lugo back to the rotation. So right now it's looking like they got a 6-man rotation, and they got some guys in the minors as well, like Ryan Weathers and Adrian Morahone and Brent Honeywell. So there's definitely options, but they got Michael Wacha for 4 years. So I guess he's going to be there and making starts. I guess maybe they just wanted a veteran that's just going to sort of be there, but I guess they'll have the run support to make up for his lack of success if that does manifest.
Yeah, this kind of felt like a sort of a weird out of nowhere move. 4 years just feels like so much for Waka, who just genuinely like. I mean, he's been very average to below average, pretty much his whole career. He's a pitcher, and last year he threw less than 130 innings. So it's like I really don't know what you're seeing to give him 4 years. But AJ Preller's apparently just got money to burn. They're just sign a blank check. There he goes. We need him. Yeah, so that's kind of weird. Just like this one. So more rules have been added for 2023. They're going to keep the zombie runner. So once it goes to extras, it's going to keep the runner on second. That's going to be permanent going forward. What are your thoughts on this immediately?
I don't know. I've never really liked the zombie runner. I feel like they're just trying to end games as fast as possible, which is sort of goofy, especially because it's like, I don't know. I'm not like one of those like baseball purists, but it just feels like I don't know. It just feels so artificial to put a random base runner out there, and also then to sort of point out that it's not the ideal way of playing baseball by removing it when you get to the postseason. That's the goofiest part that they're recognizing. Like, oh yeah, no, that like regular season doesn't really matter. Postseason is, so we're gonna take away the zombie runner. So I don't know. I've never been a fan of it, but it's not something that makes me like lose my mind.
Yeah, I've never really liked it as well. Even like going to like Coastal Plains Leagues games where they were trying it out before it was even implemented in the majors. I kind of thought like, why are they doing this? It honestly just feels like they're just like, okay, that's enough baseball for us now. I think we're done here. So let's just get a guy out there and hope someone scores and we can all go home. So that one kind of sucks. And then I think what sucks even more is this next rule and its limits being placed on position player pitchers. So now a position player can only enter to pitch if the leading team is up by at least 10 runs in the ninth inning. The trailing team has to be behind by 9 runs in the ninth inning, or
8 runs.
8 runs. That's right. Or the game is in extras. So like no more fun position player pitches when it's like 15-run blowout in the 6th inning. That sucks. Honestly, that really sucks. I always liked seeing the alerts on Twitter where it's like all caps position player pitching, and then it's like Steve Wilkerson striking a guy out on knuckleball. Like so I don't know. That was always pretty exciting to see, and they're taking it out.
I don't know. I sort of like when it's a special event and it's sort of gotten away from that. I think 2017 there was like 32 instances of position player pitching. Do you want to guess how many were in 2022?
72.
132. So it's really grown a lot. It's like quadrupled over the past 5 years. So I think this will put that to rest. I think we'll definitely see more in extras, but I don't know, extra innings is becoming like not baseball. We're just going to see runners on second and position players pitching every time it gets to the 10th inning. It's going to be really weird. But
next year it's going to be great. In extra innings, they're going to do what the old hockey overtime rules in, where it goes to like the 4th overtime. We're going to introduce a second baseball, and you're just going to have to try to hit the second baseball that's on the ground and just try to hit it like it's a cricket ball.
They unban the shift.
They unban the shift, and then every team gets a t-shirt gun to shoot at the pitcher while he's trying to pitch. Air horns, whatever they want to do. Just let them do whatever they want in extra innings. In the game, have a big fist fight on the mound, do whatever.
The mascots are pitching.
I would love that, personally. I would love the mascots pitching.
Oh, and then there's also another rule where they said, it's not really a rule, but they said they were going to crack down more on box. And I was like,
yeah,
it's not a good idea. No, that is not a good idea.
So there's also a rule with stealing as well. So that sort of fits in the balk rule. But now the rule is if you step off the rubber for a pickoff attempt and you do not successfully get the runner out by the 3rd attempt of stepping off the rubber and throwing over, it is considered a balk, and the runners get to advance.
Those were part of the original rules, but now they're doing a new one where it's like, the Luis Garcia where he does like 3 steps before he pitches.
Yeah.
you can only do one of those. So like you can do like when you're doing a windup, you can do one step back and then pitch. But he does the like rock the baby. I'm going to do 3 different steps and then go. If you do that, it's a balk.
That's probably to stop dudes like Nestor Cortez from doing like the messing with timing, like 15 steps, hold his leg in the air for 9.5 minutes, and then throw a pitch.
So you
like,
can only do one step now.
Yeah, I hate that too. I don't like that.
Yeah, it's sort of fun.
Let pitchers be weird and goofy. Like the game baseball is weird and goofy. You're taking the weird and goofy out. Make baseball goofy again. It's pissing me off. Yeah, stop adding rules. Stop it. It's whack. I don't like it.
They're going ham on the rules this year.
They really are. They also made the bases bigger. And then people are posting the stupid Photoshopped one where it's like 9.5 times.
People are believing it.
Yeah, people are believing it where the base is like 15 times bigger and they show it. It's 3 inches bigger. So I'm being an idiot. Like, I can't believe that. That's one of my friends said it to me. And they're like, is this real? No. Does it look real? It's as big as the player itself. Yeah, I don't know. That's so ridiculous. Moving on before we get off the rails. We're going to try to do some AL like off-season interview stuff. And I think we're going to start with the AL East, which sort of sucks because we do not have our resident Yankees blowhards here.
No, that's probably a good idea.
Well, yeah, it probably is. But we don't have the Yankees guys here to be like, whoa, Yankees, we're going to win the World Series. So I think we're going to start, in spirit of that, with the Red Sox.
Yeah, we're going reverse order of last year's standings. And then I think we should do like grades, but you know how like people do tier lists now on YouTube and that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
I think we should grade like that. So like S, A, B, C,
Sure.
skip D, and then F.
Who skips D tier?
I skip D tier because you're either average or you're bad.
I like D tier because it's like very much acknowledging like, all right, you're a little. I think it's very important to like have the distinction. Okay, he's just a little bit ass. Like,
all right,
we can keep the D tier. We can skip D tier for now.
Okay, so we're doing that, and I think we should also. I think we should also say how we're feeling about them going into the season as well. So sort of grade the off season and then how that sort of makes us feel going into the regular season.
Okay. So we're going to start with the Red Sox because they finished in last because they're bad and they've added players like here's the rundown of all the players that they've added.
They got a lot.
They've added Joely Rodriguez, Chris Martin, the lead singer of Coldplay, Masataka Yoshida, Kenley Jansen, Justin Turner, Corey Kluber, Adam Duvall, Adalberto Mondesi, and Richard Blyer, both of those through trades. They have lost, however, Matt Strom, Michael Wacha, Nathan Eovaldi, JD Martinez, Rich Hill, Xander Bogaerts, he's the big one, Tommy Pham, which Jake has misspelled in rundown, Josh Taylor, Tommy Fadum, and then through trades they have lost Josh Taylor and Matt Barnes. So I will let you say how you're feeling grade-wise for the Red Sox, and then I'll kind of get mine.
Yeah, you also left out the Rafael Devers extension.
Oh, yeah, because it's on a different page and I didn't see it. Rafael Devers was also extended, which is a big one.
Well, I think they did a really good job of bringing in a lot of talent, but that's only because they lost so much talent. Like they lost a lot of guys. Some of them aren't super impactful. Like I don't think anybody's going to be crying about, losing Josh Taylor or Matt Barnes or Michael Wacha, who we just talked about, but they lost really good guys that have been important to their team for the last few years. Eovaldi, Martinez, Bogaerts, and I'm not sure they replaced him. They obviously didn't replace him directly. Like Masataka Yoshida, you can say is their biggest addition, and he sort of replaces Bogaerts, but I don't think he's nearly as good as Bogaerts. And it sort of leaves a hole at shortstop where they're going to have to play like Kike Hernandez there. And then other than that, I think their next two biggest additions were Kenley and Justin Turner. I think Kenley's definitely a big step up from the relievers that they lost, but he's also getting pretty old, and they lost more than just him in the bullpen. And then they also added Justin Turner, who sort of directly replaces JD Martinez. And I think you could sort of say he's better than JD Martinez in some ways because he provides some defensive value. But like losing Bogaerts is really disappointing. And I guess they sort of tried to make up for it by extending Devers. But outside of that, I don't know. It's like you don't you don't sort of get a different idea of this team going in the season. Like if you thought last year, oh, this team is lacking some stuff, and then they lost Bogarts and Martinez and Eovaldi, and then they added these guys, you don't sort of have a different idea of the team. Like, oh, now they're so much better, or now they're like they have a different look to them. I think it's just it's sort of like they lost pieces of a puzzle and they tried to grab pieces from a different puzzle, and it's sort of like sort of working, not really. Yeah, I don't know. I think I would give them a B, because they were able to replace a lot of the talent that they lost, but it wasn't like a complete success. They're not like back to how strong they were last year when they were in last place, and they're not any stronger than they were last year either. So like, I don't see them now as contenders or anything, and I don't think it's like, oh, they're gonna tread water like they did last year. So like you can't really say that they got too much worse, but you also can't say they got any better. But they did a good job of not letting their team fall to pieces, by just not doing anything about it. So I think the fact that they sort of went for the mass signings and trades and stuff sort of kept them afloat. So I'll give them a B. And I'm feeling not too confident about them next year. I think they lost some core pieces to the team, and I don't think they did enough to replace them in full. So I'm not too confident. I feel like they're going to be towards the bottom of the division again.
Because of those reasons you just said, I think I would be inclined to give them a C. This team to me immediately screams like they're going to be 500 at best. Almost every single guy that they've added outside of Masataka Yoshida and Mondesi, who plays about 5 games a year, they're old and sort of on the back end of their career, not really at the peak of their powers anymore. Kinley struggled a little bit last year. Justin Turner is still productive, but Justin Turner signed through like his age 40 season. Corey Kluber is not Klubot anymore. It's just a lot of guys added to try to plug holes, which, like you said, I think the puzzle analogy is really big. Or like if you see the clip on TikTok where it's like all the pieces, what hole do they fit in? They fit in, oh yeah, they go in the square hole. So I think that's what the Red Sox have sort of done, just trying to plug a bunch of holes with guys. It's like, hey, these guys used to be good 5 years ago. Let's put them in there and hope it works. I don't think this team really wins like probably more than like 81 games. Like at best, I genuinely think they're 500 at best. I think the Yoshida signing is really interesting. But I mean, I really do think the Devers extension for me saved this from being more or less an F offseason. So I'm not very confident about the Red Sox. I think they will probably be better than the Orioles because the Orioles didn't really get that much better. But still, it's just like they went for mass moves, and they're all guys who are productive or used to be productive and old. And it's just a team in flux. I mean, what are the Red Sox really trying to do? It's not like their farm system is super over the top and it's like, oh, the next generation for the Red Sox is really brewing. Like, just wait till the reinforcements come. They got like Marcelo Mayer, and like it's sort of really where the cream of their prospect crop sort of falls. So I don't really expect much out of the next season of the Red Sox other than this, just kind of being mired more or less in mediocrity, which I think is at the current moment in time in professional sports. I really do think that being about a 500 team and being sort of like this, almost rudderless, is the literal worst place you can be. Other like I would almost rather your team be awful and actively tanking, kind of like the Reds, than be sort of what I think the Red Sox are going to be. So I'm not really positive on the outlook for the Red Sox. So we'll move on to the Baltimore Orioles, who I mentioned already had kind of a bad offseason, in my opinion. They added Kyle Gibson, Adam Frazier, Michael Givens, and then they through free agency, and then through trades they added James McCann and Cole Irvin. They do, however, lose Rougned Odor, Jesus Aguilar, Robinson Chirinos, and Jordan Lyles to free agency. They didn't extend anybody, so nothing on that front. But what are your thoughts on the Orioles offseason?
Disappointing. I really wish they had gone all in. It seemed like last season was the coming out party for the team, as like, we're a fun team and we're bad, and now we're going to be fun and good next year. And you would have expected them to add some big pieces so that they could feel more confident about how successful they're going to be next season, and they really didn't do that. I think they obviously needed some starters, and I really felt gross when they only had Kyle Gibson as their addition. So adding Cole Irvin makes me feel a little better, but Cole Irvin isn't a difference maker. He's not that good. I'm an A's fan, and I know he's projected for like a 4.5 ERA next season. He's not going to be super incredible. Obviously, pitching in that park will help a little bit, but they didn't really get the reinforcements that they needed. I know they'll have like Grayson Rodriguez in the rotation, hopefully to start the year, and they have a bunch of mediocre young guys like Kyle Bradish and Dean Kramer and random guys like that. But I wish they had gotten one big ace that could really improve the rotation a lot. I think their bullpen was pretty solid, and their offense is sort of slightly above average, and they really didn't change that at all. Adam Frazier is really the only addition there. So yeah, I'm just really disappointed. I wish they had done a lot more, and I think I'm leaning F for this one because just they had the opportunity to sort of take that next step and actually become a legitimate contender in that division. And they really didn't do that. If Cole Irvin is your biggest offseason acquisition, that sort of says something, especially for a team in the position that they were, to capitalize on the success that they had last year. And they're projected by Pacoda to finish in last place with only 74 wins. So not even the projections are confident in them. They're going to need to take a lot of steps forward with the rest of their team and call up a bunch of guys from the minors to sort of make up for the lack of moves that they made this offseason. And I feel like these are sort of the moves you make on a team that's like this close to being like a World Series contender, right? They just need like a couple little holes filled or a couple little depth pieces. But right now it was like you need that one impact acquisition to give the fan base and give the team that oomph it needs to take that last big step into contention, and they didn't do that at all.
Yeah, I completely agree. This one gets an F for me. It is disappointing. It's super disappointing, especially if you're an Orioles fan, because you would expect. I mean, like they obviously have some great young players, Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, and then you have Grayson Rodriguez coming up, Ryan Mountcastle as well. So you got a really nice young core, and you'd expect for it to be sort of bolstered. Like you can look at the blueprint like the Padres have. It's like, okay, well we got Tatis coming. We already had Machado. Yeah, I don't really count Hosmer, but they had him. Let's acquire some talent to go around it. And I understand not every team can operate like the San Diego Padres. That's just not realistic. But this was a good free agency to be dipping into to try to get some impact guys to try to help this lineup, and especially to try to help that rotation, which does not look very good outside of like Grayson Rodriguez and whenever John Means comes back. So seeing realistically your biggest offseason acquisitions being Kyle Gibson and Cole Irvin, it's not very inspiring. And I would honestly bank on the Orioles being the worst team in the division, like I previously said. So I really think this is an F for me.
Yeah. Do you think they're gonna get last place last year or next year? They're just gonna be fighting with the Red Sox to be bad.
I think it'll be close, but I think it will be close, but I think that just because they're a younger team and because their rotation just isn't good, I really think that the Orioles are probably going to finish in the last game. I don't in last place. I don't think it's going to be by like 10 games. I think it'll be like by 1 or 2. But yeah, I think they'll be worse than the Red Sox.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be close.
I hope they prove me wrong because I want them to be an exciting young team. But they didn't add anything, and it's just going to be like, okay, Gunnar Henderson carry the freight, Adley Rutschman carry the freight, Great Rod. Whenever you come up, you got it. Like the one bat you added because the 2 bats you added are Adam Frazier and James McCann. James McCann's a backup catcher. He's not very good. Adam Frazier is a league average hitter at best. Doesn't really hit for any power. Doesn't really offer you much of anything. He's just decent little veteran guy to go play second base. I'm not too thrilled about the moves that they made. I mean, Michael Givens is a pretty solid reliever, but
their bullpen's fine.
Yeah, their bullpen's fine. It's one of the big strengths of their team. They needed help in their lineup, and they desperately needed help in their rotation. And Kyle Gibson doesn't move the needle. Cole Irvin he's pretty good, but he's not great. I don't know. It wasn't enough, and that's really disappointing because everyone sort of loved the Cinderella story. Orioles last season, so terrible for like the last several seasons, and then here they come, almost making the wild card. Just fall a little bit short. You'd hope they'd make that push to try to be like, okay, we're going to be in the playoffs next year, and then build from there. That's how you create young, good teams, like with exciting cores. Everyone's kind of followed that blueprint for a long time now. Okay, young hitter core, let's build him up from there now and figure it out. And they just were like, okay, they punted the ball on third down. It's like, I don't know why they would do this.
Mhm.
It's very disappointing. Moving on, we've got a long list of additions to talk about for the Tampa Bay Rays because the only player they've currently added is Zach Eflin. Big ticket sign, Zach Eflin. They have, however, in Tampa, lost quite a few. They'll lose out on Mike Zunino, Corey Kluber, David Peralta, Kevin Kiermaier, Nick Anderson. All of those have left in free agency. And then through trades, they have lost G-Man Choi, Xavier Edwards, JT Chargois, Ryan Yarbrough, also through free agency. Brooks Raley is traded away, and JP Fireeisen also traded away. Bunch of extensions to talk about in here as well. Jeffrey Springs, Pete Fairbanks, and Yandy Diaz also all extended. Sort of a weird free agency and offseason for the Tampa Bay Rays, who also felt like they needed to get a little bit better because their powers waned a little bit last year. What are your thoughts?
I think this is a clear F just because they literally just sat on their hands. You know, they made the largest free agent deal in their franchise history, which is crazy. Not only the price that it was, but also for Zach Eflin. Super weird. And then that was the only thing they decided to do. They obviously did a bunch of like minor league transactions and minor league signings and that kind of stuff, but that really doesn't move the needle at all. And to lose this many guys, this many veterans, this many guys out of your bullpen and your lineup is pretty hard to face when you're not adding anybody. I think the extensions don't really make up for it either. You know, just like keeping those guys around is good. You know, they were going to be around, but I think they were only buying 1 or 2 years of free agency for those guys either. And they're not like star players on the teams. Like Jeffrey Springs is going to be solid. Pete Fairbanks could close out games, and Yandy Diaz is underrated, but I don't think that's makes up for the fact that they lost half of their team and then didn't do anything. So they're going to be really counting on in-house options. They're going to be counting on young players coming up and filling the holes and relying on their ability to turn random dudes into really good relievers, which is what the Rays are known for. But yeah, I would have liked to see them do something with all the money that they freed up with all these guys hitting free agency and being traded, and they did absolutely nothing. I think Zach Eflin's probably going to be really good. The Rays know what they're doing, but that doesn't change the fact that they did not do enough to stay competitive in a really tough division. So I'm not really feeling too confident about them next year either. I feel like they could be sort of milling around with the Red Sox and the Orioles. I think they'll be slightly ahead of them. They're projected for 86 wins by Pacoda. I don't think they quite get there. I think they're going to be low 80s. I think they're going to be slightly above the Orioles and the Red Sox, but you know, they're going to be sort of fighting really hard to overcome the lacking ability of their lineup.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I'm not a big fan of this offseason. They didn't do enough really for them to try to compete in their division. I mean, they were the last team, really worst team that made the playoffs record wise last year, and then they didn't get any better. So like you're adding Zach Eflin, or your rotation is the strength of your team, and then you add a starting pitcher. You really need offense, and then you just don't add anything. It's tough pill to swallow. I think it's an F. I think the Rays as a whole are kind of they're declining. I think they're not rapidly, but it's going to be slow decline back to sort of 500-ish, which, like I just said, with the Red Sox is the absolute worst place I think for you to try to be in baseball or in any professional sport now. So yeah, not a big fan here. I would have loved to seen them add just because the Rays are exciting, and they never do this in free agency. They always try to fleece someone in a trade, and they just didn't even do anything this time. They just completely sat on their hands and were content. So I mean, maybe they'll prove us wrong. The Rays are a team that has a reputation for being smarter than everybody else, but this time I really don't think so. I think this is enough. So we can talk about the Toronto Blue Jays. Next, additions-wise, they ended up acquiring Eric Swanson in a trade. They signed Chris Bassett in free agency. Kevin Kiermaier was added through free agency as well. They had the big trade for Dalton Varsho, and they added Brandon Belt and Chad Green through free agency. They lost, however, Jackie Bradley Jr. to free agency, as well as Ross Stripling. David Phelps retired. They traded away Teoscar Hernandez, Gabriel Moreno, and Lourdes Gurriel Jr. And then Julian Merriweather also was lost to waivers. So no extensions also to talk about. So how are you feeling immediately about the Toronto Blue Jays?
I don't know. I feel like I don't really feel something either way. Like I don't think this was a bad offseason at all. And I also don't think like, oh my gosh, the the Blue Jays are crazy looking this year. Like last year, they sort of had the big offseason, especially after coming off the big trade deadline that they had at the 2021 deadline. And their team was looking incredible. But now they're sort of at the point where that has worn off, especially with Barrios not really performing to what we thought he would, and Kikuchi falling off as well. And now it's sort of I feel like they just sort of treaded water. You know, they traded guys that had expiring contracts and they brought guys in that could be interesting, but they weren't really big difference makers for me. I love to see what Brandon Belt can do outside of San Francisco. I think Dalton Varsho is really underrated, but he also provides a lot of his value with his glove, and that's sort of what Kevin Kiermaier is as well. Chris Bassett's pretty old, and I feel like he's sort of comparable to Ross Stripling. I think he's a step above him, but they could end up being pretty similar. And Eric Swanson has had sort of one good season out of the bullpen, so you don't really know what you're getting there. I like what they did, but I also like a lot of what they lost. Like I think Teoscar Hernandez is a tough guy to take out of this team, and Gabriel Moreno is one of the best catching prospects in baseball, and Lourdes Gurriel was sort of the heart and soul of the team in many ways, and they lost a lot of depth pieces as well. So I think this is a C for me. I just nothing sways me either way. I don't think they did bad, but I also don't think they did super amazing. I'm still feeling really confident about this team. They have an incredible lineup that can sort of do a lot more than what they did last year. It's hard to forget that they got Whit Merrifield at the deadline, and they've got Matt Chapman still there, who sort of has been quiet since leaving Oakland. And obviously they've got Vlad Jr. and Bo Bichette and George Springer. So the lineup is pretty deep. They've got a really stacked rotation, and their bullpen is sort of getting a little better, especially with that addition of Swanson. So I feel pretty confident. I think they can win this division. They're going to be button heads with the Yankees all year, but this offseason doesn't really sway me one way or the other to award them anything greater than a C.
Yeah, I'm kind of flip-flopping between C and B. I'm a little bit more optimistic, so I think I'll say B. I really like the Varsho trade. I understand that they lost Gabriel Moreno, but it's really not like he was going to unseat Alejandro Kirk just because of Kirk. I think it's his job really to lose. Danny Jansen's also pretty decent. I like Moreno. I like Gurriel Jr., but they only had 1 year of control for Gurriel. They lost Teoscar, but it was the same thing. They have 1 year control for Teoscar Hernandez. So they got rid of guys that may or may not have been re-signed in the first place. They add Varsho, who's controllable. I really like the additions of Belt and Chad Green. I think Belt, he's obviously not what he used to be, but I think he's still got a little bit to give. Kiermaier also to add to center, really kind of take some of the defensive burden away from George Springer, who's been struggling a little bit with health. So saving him a little bit is good. Eric Swanson, I'm not as high about. Chris Bassett's a little bit older, but you add to your rotation. I like this move for the Blue Jays. I think I'm pretty confident about them to be a playoff team again. Probably not going to unseat the Yankees at the top of their division because we're going to talk about them in a second. But I like this. I think this is a pretty solid offseason for the Blue Jays. They did what they had to do. If, however, Lourdes Gurriel Jr. and Teoscar Hernandez had more control on them, getting rid of them, what they got back, I would be less confident. But yeah, both of those guys, they probably are going to re-sign one at most, is what I was thinking. So yeah, losing guys like Stripling kind of sucks, but I think they can live with it with what they've added. I like their offseason so far.
Fair points.
And then the last one that we're going to talk about in the AL East is obviously the one that won the AL East, and that was the New York Yankees. And they had a couple big additions. So they retained Anthony Rizzo, keeping through free agency. Same thing for Aaron Judge, also through free agency. They added back old friend Tommy Kahnle. also through the free agent market. And then the big one, that's not Aaron Judge, obviously. They got Carlos Rodon, best starter on the market. Free agency as well. They lost, however, Chad Green, Andrew Benintendi, Miguel Castro, Jameson Tyone, Miguel Carpenter. He's out in San Diego, man. He's out in San Diego. New alias for Matt Carpenter. Aroldis Chapman, Marwin Gonzalez, Zach Britton, Lucas Luetge. That's pretty much it. They extended Brian Cashman, Jake put LOL next to that because that is very funny. But yeah, big off season for the Bronx Bombers. And what are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I think you have to look at this one from where they were at the beginning of the offseason, when they didn't have Aaron Judge, they didn't have Rizzo, and they didn't have, obviously, the Rodon signed. But retaining guys like Judge and Rizzo, I think, can be sort of understated because they were sort of never left, you know what I mean? But there was a time when Arson Judge was on the Giants and the Yankees offseason was looking really bad. So the fact that they were able to retain him, I think that's huge. I think that's big plus points. I think Rizzo staying there is also really important because they really don't have too many great first basemen. And bringing in Rodon is huge. Probably the best free agent starter on the market. One of the best, you can argue, if he's better than DeGrom at this stage in his career. So I think that was huge. They lost, I think, more depth guys. I know Benintendi was an all-star, but I think he's sort of overrated. Tyone is pretty mad, and you replaced him directly with Rodon. I think Matt Carpenter is obviously going to take a step back after an incredible season, and losing Aroldis Chapman, I mean, that's huge points right there, right? I think I would give them an A because they did a really good job of spending a ton of money to keep the big boy in town, and also bringing in Rodon to give them a pretty elite rotation with Garrett Cole and Luis Severino and Nestor Cortez as the top four guys along with Rodon. So I feel pretty good about their offseason, even though they didn't make a ton of moves. I think they made the right moves and they made big moves. So that sort of moves the needle a lot more when you bring in guys for that amount of money that are going to be huge difference makers on your team, and you don't lose anybody that's sort of making the fan base cry or anything.
Yeah, I think I would honestly be inclined to give this one an S.
Ooh.
Yeah, I think this is a really, really good offseason. The only thing that I still would have liked to have seen them add is maybe one more relatively big bat, but I understand is what it is. A lot of their money shelled out towards Aaron Judge, which Judge is the one you had to get. Obviously, they didn't get him. Cashman was going to be blasted off into outer space. They keep an important clubhouse guy like Anthony Rizzo, Cubs fan. Everyone knows just how much I would love Anthony Rizzo then. And then Carlos Rodon, I think, is so good. I want to say still an underrated signing, even though everyone knows he's good. Just because he's going to add to that rotation, and that was the biggest thing that they needed. They had some depth in it, but they didn't have another guy that's like, okay, if we don't have Cole, who can we really give the ball to that's going to sort of serve as that ace? Like, who can we rely on that's not Garrett Cole? I think Carlos Rodon is going to be that guy. I'm not really too pressed. If I was a Yankee fan, I wouldn't be too pressed about losing any of the guys that you've lost. Chad Green, I mean, if he's healthy, he's good. Andrew Benintendi is super overrated. Miguel Castro, who cares? Jameson Tyone, I think you can live with losing Jameson Tyone if you get Carlos Rodon. Matt Carpenter, I mean, he really sort of caught lightning in a bottle. So, I mean, who really knows what he's going to be if he can do that again? Marwin Gonzalez, I don't even think he's still in the league. I honestly think he got signed by someone in NPB. Zach Britton, who cares? And then Lucas Luetge is 1,000 years old. The extended Brian Cashman, that kind of sucks. That almost pushes you down into an A, but whatever. Yeah, I really like the Yankees offseason, unfortunately, because I don't want the Yankees to be good. But I do think they are going to be very good. I would expect them to win the division again, and I would expect them to compete for a World Series again like they usually do.
You're right about Marwin. He plays for the Oryx Buffaloes now of the MPB.
Yeah, Oryx Buffaloes, same. Oryx Buffaloes are cool. If you want to go follow the Oryx Buffaloes, they have a guy I talked about on our last pod, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who is going to be really, really cool to watch at the World Baseball Classic.
Let's go. Coming up, a couple weeks.
Cool segue. Go read our way too early predictions that we talked about in the last article or in our last podcast. 2 weeks ago before Jake had monkeypox. So that's all we're going to talk about for the AL East. I think we're going to talk about cool stuff because we're nerds. We're going to talk about video game, MLB the show. I want to turn this over to Jake because this is
Sure.
like Jake's guy. It's awesome.
Yeah, no, I'm a big MLB The Show fan. Been playing since 2009. That was the first game I got. I think that was one of the first video games. Who was on the cover of that one? Dustin Pedroia.
Testing your video game ball knowledge.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I could name all of them, so don't do that. Anyway, this is a game I buy every year. It's obviously the best baseball game out there. There's not too much competition for what it provides, and it's always exciting to see who the cover athlete's going to be and what kind of legends and new features they're bringing to the game. 2 weeks ago, they had already announced the cover athlete, and it was Jazz Chisholm Jr. I talked about him as my NL MVP pick for many reasons. Like David said, go back and watch that podcast or read our article to hear my early predictions about why Jazz is going to be the NL MVP, but he's going to be the cover athlete. There was a lot of discourse around that because he's not super well known. I think in baseball circles, like obviously Davis and I know who Jazz is, and he's a very electric player who's got a lot of charisma and personality, and I think that makes him really likable. So amongst baseball fans, I think he's a good choice to be the cover, but for people that don't know baseball, they're looking at that and they're like, who the heck is this guy? But they sort of made up for that by announcing the cover athlete for the MVP edition, which is like the special edition, and it's going to be Derek Jeter. They're bringing the captain back to MLB The Show. He probably hasn't been in the game. When did he retire? 2010 or something?
Typically, they have to wait like 5 years until they can get another like a player's rights like that.
I don't think they do. I think they can get him on there.
A lot of the times they do because there's some sort of weird thing with what's it called? There's some sort of weird thing with the players union. So they typically wait 5 years, but because Jeter's in the Hall of Fame, they have the rights to the Hall of Fame players. So
yeah, it was 2014 is when he retired. So that was the last time he was in the game. So it's been like 8 years. So it'll be cool to see him in there. And I think Yankees fans are going to be buying this up like crazy.
Yeah, one more thing that's really cool that they've added is they are going to include players from the Negro Leagues, and they had this whole cool video, and if you want to go watch it, it's really awesome. And if you want to follow him on Twitter too, they did a really cool video with Bob Kendrick, who's president of the Negro League Hall of Fame. That the Hall of Fame is so cool, and it's an important part of baseball history, especially being Black History Month. You should go check it out. It's just really cool stuff. It's a large part of the history of American baseball. I could gush for hours about how important it is, but they've already announced that the first season, because there's going to be multiple releases and it's going to be really cool, is they're going to have the following players be in Diamond Dynasty, which is like their big premier mode like to play online, like the ultimate team, I guess. And they're going to include the Negro League teams, which is really interesting. But they're going to have Satchel Paige, obviously. Satchel Paige,
huge.
Yeah, that is really cool. They're going to have Jackie Robinson. They already do normally have Jackie Robinson.
It's a different Jackie Robinson, though. It's a Negro League Jackie Robinson.
It is a different Jackie Robinson when he's playing for the Kansas City Monarchs. Jake, would you like to know some really cool baseball history about the Negro Leagues before we move on?
Yes.
So the Negro Leagues were actually founded by this following man, Andrew Rube Foster. He's the godfather of the Negro Leagues, and he founded it because they did not have a professional league. And he founded it at a local YMCA in Kansas City, Missouri, which is the home of the Kansas City Monarchs. That building is now owned and operated and currently being restored by the Negro League Hall of Fame. So Andrew Rube Foster is also going to be in it. He was a pitcher. He actually had like the most wins, or he was the best pitcher of the 1900s or whatever. Hilton Smith is going to be in it. I don't know enough about Hilton Smith. Hank Thompson is going to be in it. He's the first to play in the AL and the NL. John Donaldson is going to be in it as well. Martin Dihiga, who is one of the first Latin players to play. He's from Cuba. He's also the first player and the only player that is in 5 different baseball Hall of Fames.
He's a two-way player too.
He is a two-way player. And then one of my favorites, really means a lot to me, is John Jordan Buck O'Neill, who is the first African-American coach, obviously with my wonderful Chicago Cubs. It's going to be in Storylines Season 1. So there's going to be several seasons of the Negro Leagues, and they're going to add different players. Hopefully there's going to be some cool guys in there like Turkey Stearns and Oil Can Boyd, Cool Papa
Josh
Bell,
Gibson,
and current new Negro League integration on Fangraphs, all-time WRC plus leader, Josh Gibson. He's the one I'm hoping for most. I'm super proud of like my door at my job because I'm a teacher. If you didn't know that, I'm a teacher. We're doing Black History Month stuff. Have a whole cool Negro League history door with all sorts of bios for all the players. I was really proud of that. So this means a lot to me. It's something I care about. I'll gush about it more, and whenever they add more players, we'll talk about it on the pod. So I think on that note, our pod has gone long enough. It has been 1 hour and 10 minutes exactly right now. So I think it's time, as always, to bring in the closer.
Let's go. All right. I chose this one since we're doing the AL East offseason in review. I chose a guy that has pitched for 3 different AL East teams, and that's going to be Mike Timlin, who had an 18-year career from 1991 to 2008 with the Blue Jays, Mariners, Orioles, Cardinals, Phillies, and Red Sox. He was drafted by the Blue Jays in the 5th round of the 1987 draft. He debuted 4 years later in April of 1991 against the Red Sox with 1 1/3 innings with no hits, no earned, 2 walks, and no strikeouts. He featured a 93-mile-per-hour fastball, and he induced strikeouts and grounders with his sinker and slider as well. He pitched to a 3.16 ERA in his debut campaign, starting and saving 3 games. He had a career-high 108.2 innings pitched that year and a career-high 85 strikeouts as well. He finished 6th in AL Rookie of the Year award voting that year. And then he went back to the minors for a little in 1992 and pitched okay in the majors, but he also won his first World Series ring with the 1992 Blue Jays. And if you know anything about the Blue Jays franchise, you'll know they also won the World Series the next year, during which Timlin sort of struggled a little bit. He saved just 3 games across the 1993 and 1994 campaigns, pitching to a 4.89 ERA across 95 2/3 innings pitched. But he did net himself that second World Series ring, which will come into play later on. He turned things around in 1995, giving him a leg up on the closer role for 1996. So 1995, he had a 2.14 ERA, which was a career best across 42 innings. He also saved 5 games. So then 1996, when he took over the closer role, he had 31 saves, which was the highest mark he would ever reach in his career. That came with a 3.22 ERA across 56 2/3 innings. Then he was traded to the Mariners at the 1997 deadline after posting a 2.87 ERA with 9 saves for Toronto in the first half. And he pitched to a 3.86 ERA with 1 save for Seattle in the second half. And then he was solid in his only full season with Seattle in 1998. He had a 2.95 ERA, 19 saves across 79 1/3 innings. And then he hit free agency, where he signed with the Orioles, but he pitched just 1 full season for that team before being traded at the 2000 deadline. That 1 full season featured 27 saves, a 3.57 ERA, and 63 innings pitched. And then 2000, he pitched for the Orioles before being traded to the Cardinals. He had a 4.89 ERA and 11 saves with the Orioles before posting a 3.34 ERA with 1 save for the Cardinals. He did the same thing that he did before for the last 3 teams that he pitched for, where he just played 1 full season for them before being traded. So in St. Louis, he had 1 full season for them in 2001, and he pitched to a ERA over 4 and saved just 3 games, and then was traded at the 2002 deadline after posting a 2.51 ERA in the first half. He was traded to the Philadelphia Phillies, where he had a 3.79 ERA. Interestingly enough, across that entire season, he posted a career best 0.92 whip in total. So that's his career best in that department. And then he signed with the Red Sox prior to 2003, sort of where I remember his career picking up. And he was very reliable across 6 seasons to round out his career. 2003, he had a 3.55 ERA and 2 saves. 2004, he had a 4.13 ERA and 1 save. And he also earned his 3rd World Series ring. 2005, he had a 2.24 ERA with 13 saves and a career high and American League leading 81 games appeared in. 2006, he struggled with shoulder and oblique injuries, pitching to a 4.36 ERA and just 9 saves. And then 2007, he turned things around a bit overcoming those injuries with a 3.42 ERA and 1 save. And he also earned his 4th World Series ring, making him the only pitcher to appear in and win 4 World Series without winning one with the Yankees. So that's his claim of fame there. And then he rounded out his career in 2008 with a 5.66 ERA and just 1 save. So it ended on a sour note, but it was his age 42 campaign. So it was time for him to call it a career. And he finished that career 8th all time on the career appearances leaderboard with 1,058 appearances. And he trails only Jesse Orozco, Mike Stanton, John Franco, Mariano Rivera, Dennis Eckersley, Hoyt Wilhelm, and Dan Plesac. So a who's who of some of the best relievers in baseball history. So for his career, he had 19 Baseball Reference WAR across 1,204.1 innings pitched with 872 strikeouts, a 3.63 ERA, a 1.28 WHIP, and 141 saves, which is tied for 101st all-time on the saves leaderboard with Wade Davis.
An awesome career for Mike Timlin. As always, make sure you follow our socials. They are at the bottom, currently blocked out by the bring in the closer screen. That's okay. You can follow me on Twitter at DVS Bird. My name is Davis Bird. I work for the Athletes Hub that presents this site, or that presents this podcast. Excuse me. You can go check them out at theathleteshub.org and follow them on Twitter at Athletes Hub. Make sure you check it back all the time because we got cool pods coming out, articles. Everywhere you can read more stuff from us. Like I said, our Way Too Early Predictions article has come out recently. If you want to hear what we think about the upcoming season to get you more in the swing of watching soon-to-be spring training baseball. If you want to follow Jake Crumpler on Twitter, follow him at Jake Crumpler. Super easy. He's a cool dude sometimes. I want to clarify. Sometimes. No, he's a cool guy. Here at School Baseball Stuff, if you want to run your fantasy baseball leagues, you should also follow him on Twitter because he does a whole bunch of stuff, profiling players that will help you win your leagues. So go follow that. What else do you want to plug, Jake?
Sure. I also write for Pitcher List and Baseball HQ. Pitcher List just updated to PL8, so their player pages have a lot of new stuff on there. That website's absolutely incredible.
Yeah,
it's
they're
like
really cool.
Quickly becoming the best baseball website on the internet, and that's their goal over there. So definitely, if you want fantasy baseball or just regular baseball stuff, definitely go check out Pitcher List. And you can also listen to the podcast I do over there, which is called In the Pen. We're recording tomorrow, so if you are interested in reliever stuff, we talk about relievers, and that's it. So there's all kinds of stuff to listen over there. But yeah, definitely give me a follow on Twitter because I keep posting a bunch of stat stuff, and people have been enjoying it. So if you like little tidbits or stats that help you find players that may be underrated, definitely give me a follow.
I've definitely enjoyed them today because they were about Yu Darvish and Seiya Suzuki, who are both my boys. So make sure you follow him. And then, like I said, follow Athletes Hub on Twitter. It's important to remember that while we are pumping out sports content, and are doing sports journalism, we are more on the fan side. So we are giving you fan perspectives from real people. We're not a real huge media outlet. You're getting real thoughts from real fans, just like you, which I think is important. And we're trying to stay organic, and we're trying to stay with those kind of roots to really keep us firmly supplanted and keep us rooted to the ground. So, I mean, I want to hear from what people like me have to say. I imagine you feel the same. So make sure you follow us there and check us out and come back with us. We do this every Wednesday at 9-ish. I know it was a little after 9. That's my fault. That's my fault tonight. But yeah, check back here and make sure you follow and watch our other podcast, which has got, you watched our last one. It's got Devin, Isaiah, and then our old friend Gary Sonnenberger, who is on there talking about basketball. I feel like basketball with deep takes from 3. That's all we've got for this time. Check back with us next Wednesday. Peace.